Yes, the recent events make it look bad for Russia and promising for Ukraine and, in effect, the West. But is that really so? To really understand, you have to know what's actually going on the battlefield, as well as in Putin's KGB-trained mind. And that's why we're going to reveal leaked insights from a former CIA super spy, Andrew Bustamante, and expose Putin's dark KGB tactics and schemes he has up his sleeve to win the Russia-Ukraine war. Despite the recent counter-offensive launch from Ukraine and the heavy losses that Russia ended up facing, Putin seems to be determined more than ever to carry on the fight at whatever cost. Putin's KGB background is a key factor in his determination to win the fight in Ukraine, despite significant setbacks, and this is exactly how he's going to win. Vladimir Putin has everyone on edge. He's conducting the first major war in Europe since 1945, which has triggered a global energy crisis and a lot of headaches over a possible nuclear war. For you to understand Putin's perspective on the war, you have to bear in mind that he was made by the KGB, and for the KGB, all that mattered was preserving the leadership's hold on power at all costs. Putin's history with the KGB also contributes to his appetite for hybrid warfare, which combines conventional and unorthodox techniques. Right now, Ukraine seems to be at an advantage, but there were some key strategic factors that prompted Ukraine to launch its counter-offense, and these have everything to do with why Putin will inevitably win the war. But more on that in a minute. See, previously the Ukrainian president has expressed disappointment in NATO. He said that the commitment to support Ukraine from the West and NATO seemed to have started fading off. This was one of the biggest factors that prompted him to launch the counter-offense because he wanted to show at least a small victory on the battlefield to give the Western and NATO countries a reason to continue their support in Ukraine. But according to the ex-CIA spy Andrew Bustamante, it doesn't really matter how many wins Ukraine shows on the battlefield. The US, the UK, and other Western countries are sending the weapons they have to Ukraine, but they're not replenishing their weapons stores. The supply chain to make new weapons is tied back to China, which is currently going through a manufacturing dry spell due to its COVID policies. So now, obviously, the supply chain issues are impacting Ukraine. The West can still send money, but they cannot continue to send weaponry because they need to save some for their own protection too. On the other hand, Russia can generate its own weapons. So clearly, Russia is at an advantage here, regardless of what anyone says. Then, another game that Russia seems to be playing is the game of manipulation. Some warfare analysts believe that Russia is working off of a deception model. Putin has made some mistakes, true, but has he really? Was everything a mistake, or was it a deliberate attempt to manipulate the West into believing that they're suddenly now losing the war? Remember the part when we told you about Putin's KGB training? The world portrays Putin as mentally unstable with brain damage, etc. But according to Bustamante, this is a straight-up spy playbook move 101. Putin wants you to underestimate him because that way he has the advantage. As the West continues to underestimate him and belittle him, they're putting themselves in a superior position and then make decisions based on flawed data. Meanwhile, Putin has the real upper hand. Think about it. It's been 9 months of underestimating Putin, and here we are. Putin is still grinding it out. As per Bustamante, Russia is also making phantom retreats in order to manipulate Ukraine so that they come forward and use all their resources, which they have. But has it helped them in the long run? I mean, these small wins are not going to get them accepted by NATO. Why, you ask? Well, for one, a NATO membership for Ukraine would mean a propaganda victory for Putin. Putin has emphasized the idea that NATO poses a threat to Russia ever since the conflict in Ukraine started. He's frequently defended invading Ukraine by claiming that doing so will protect Russia's territorial integrity. Now watch this. If Ukraine joined NATO, this would automatically entail placing Western soldiers and military bases on Ukrainian territory. Secondly, according to Article 5 of the NATO Collective Defense Treaty, if one member state is attacked, all the other members must see the attack as an attack on themselves and support their ally. And for this reason, other member countries will not back Ukraine's bid, at least not until it's free from Russia's clutches, which isn't going to happen anytime soon. Because, Putin is one stubborn son of a gun. Now think about this. Ukraine is already going through war. Why would the NATO members want to bring a war on themselves? And why would they want to do anything actively for Ukraine when they can simply avoid that by not accepting Ukraine within NATO? I mean, they'll send money and help and all, and Ukraine is getting that kind of security from NATO even when it's not part of it. But still, having Ukraine with them as their own and then dealing with its war is just something else. Something that most NATO countries are just not willing to take on. And guess what? The US and other Western countries are also slowly backing off. We'll tell you why this is happening in just a minute. But this is another reason why Bustamante believes that Russia will win this war eventually. Because Russia will never back down, and Putin plans to prolong this war for as long as possible. Also because he's got enough patience and military potential to keep wearing the West and NATO down until they just stop supporting Ukraine and he wins. Now, why are the Western countries turning away from Ukraine? Well, to be honest, it's in their best interest, as pointed out by Bustamante. They cannot continue supporting Ukraine forever. As far as the support goes, they cannot take it any further than that. The attention shifting away from Ukraine has already started happening. I mean, look at the world media. Have you seen them covering the Russia-Ukraine war as frequently as they were at the beginning? The answer is a big no, and that is exactly what Putin is counting on. While Ukraine is dependent on the West for military support and weaponry, Russia isn't, so it's like a long, slow burn policy that Russia is applying, when eventually the entire world stops paying attention to Ukraine. Now, something that you and the rest of the world is worrying about. Is there going to be a tactical nuclear weapon deployed in Ukraine by Russia? Bustamante says that the probability of Russia beginning a nuclear war is low despite all Putin's threats. The reason is that it's not in anybody's interest. This would escalate things to an uncontrollable level, and that's not what Russia really wants. Russia mainly wants influence and to make NATO realize that they should not accept Ukraine's bid. Russia also doesn't want to go to war with NATO at the moment, so this is unlikely to occur. But that doesn't mean that a nuclear attack cannot happen. Russia won't do it, but any terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or someone like them who would want to mess up with the whole world might take this opportunity to send a message to Ukraine. The whole world would collapse and jump to conclusions and obviously blame Russia since Russia is viewed as the biggest aggressor. So, the likelihood of that happening is actually higher than Russia beginning a nuclear war. Now coming to Putin's real objectives. Putin thinks that Russia suffered greatly as a result of how the Cold War ended. Any geopolitical concerns expressed by Russia were never taken seriously by the West. For instance, NATO's expansion to the east. Russia made numerous attempts to start such a dialogue, but the West rejected each one. So you see, Putin's real beef is with the West and NATO, not with Ukraine. Russia sees this as a waging war on the West on Ukrainian soil. For them, Ukraine is a Western-held anti-Russian weapon. The major objectives of Putin in this conflict have never been territorial gains. Instead, he wants to ruin Ukraine as part of an anti-Russia effort and prevent the West from utilizing Ukraine as a base for geopolitical actions that are hostile to Russia. There is another assumption in the West that Putin is losing not only domestically but also military-wise, and given the current political climate in Russia, Putin's descent may be imminent. Well, that's not true either. Despite internal conflicts, the Russian elite and the regime are standing firm around Putin. But if Putin was unseated from within, it would be because some hawkish leader thinks he's not doing enough. And that means that his successor will be much, much worse, and that is a terrifying thought.